Welcome back to the Mindful Classroom. I have to apologize. I had a little bit of a hiccup in recording these. I intended to post this on Friday, but I left Thursday to share a wonderful moment with my wife, my daughter, her husband, his family. My wife threw my daughter a baby shower, so I was unable to record or get anything together. And just in the process of beginning this, so I don't have anything pre-recorded, so there was no way to keep up with that. It is something that taught me a lesson that I really need to work on having some things pre-recorded and kind of front load these, so in times that I do go away or something comes up, I can cover that. So I apologize. So I'll post this today, and later today I will also post a meditation, and then I'll get back into the process, which will be a wonderful thing. As I said, my second podcast is going to look at something I'm reading, talking about why it strikes me, why I think it's good, why I recommend it to you. If I'm reading something that I don't like, that it doesn't really work or isn't inspiring, I'm not going to bring it up on here. The intent of this one is really to give you things to think about and something that maybe you want to read or in some cases listen to, because between a paid subscription to Audible or using Libby through the Cape May County Library or whatever audiobook services your library has, there are a lot of free options to listen to books. And I kind of like the balance of both. Today I'm going to be talking about a book that I'm currently finishing up, but I also listened to two books on our drive to Charleston and our drive back from Charleston. So that gave me the opportunity to enjoy a little of everything. So maybe I'll talk about all three today. We'll see where we go. But without further ado, I bring you The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. I was introduced to this book. Well, first off, I've been familiar with Rick Rubin's work. I love Rick Rubin's work. Between bringing together Aerosmith and Run DMC, the work he did very late in Johnny Cash's career. I don't think we would have the song Hurt if it wasn't for Rick Rubin's vision of what he saw Johnny Cash being able to do at this stage in his career. And countless other things that so often you look at liner notes and you pick something up and had no idea, and you realize, oh, that does have that kind of a unique sound. I think Rick Rubin is very good at getting to what the artist wants to do and not trying to put his thumbprint on it, but really working in a harmonious respect with the artist. And that's a lot of what comes up in here. I'll tell you, it's not a biography. So he's really not giving you a lot of the people he's worked with and the stories he works with. And in fact, in one instance, he tells a story, and I'm familiar with the story from listening to him in interviews and on the radio. And he doesn't even mention the artist's name because it's not about that. This is about the creative process and what we can do to tap into our own creative process. And in fact, everybody's is a little different, but there are some commonalities that we all can look toward that will help us work with that better. So what I'm going to kind of do is talk first about the book as a whole, and then I've got a couple passages marked off that I'll share with you. I'll tell you what my insight is. You can get a flavor for the book and really see if it's something that you're interested in pursuing. So this starts with taking the idea of a creative process. And when he says a creative process, it truly can be anything. At times he talks about creating a sculpture or a painting or writing. From 31 years in the classroom or teaching. So much of what we do brings out that artistic nature that we have and how we can best use that to make what we produce unique to us. And like anything, I think when something is really true to you, it has an authenticity and it carries much, much better than when we try to copy what someone else has done. All too often, that's the process of what happens. Somebody's successful. Somebody finds their niche and creates some kind of work in their niche. And then everybody else tries to mirror what they've done. and you just get a carbon copy after a carbon copy after a carbon copy. And some of those carbon copies, they may find some success, financial success, maybe even some critical success. But are they really producing what they believe in? And is it authentic to them? And that's what this looks at. It looks at the idea of, first, in the beginning of the book, he brings up the idea of planting a seed. The first chapter is everyone is a creator, that every single one of us can create something. Even if we don't believe in ourselves, even if we don't think we can, we all have that nature and that creativity that we just have to find out how to tap into. And in the worlds that I've worked in, I have seen certain teachers, when you watch that teacher, you're just in awe because it's poetry. It's just a magical thing that they do. Or chefs who can take flavors that you never knew would come together and just create an incredible dish that it just brings back memory and passion and all of those things. And the other idea here is the idea of how we nurture that vessel. So if you look in the beginning, just to give you a flavor from the very beginning, and everyone is a creator. He starts the book off, and each chapter starts off with just a short passage. Nothing in this book is known to be true. It's a reflection of what I've noticed. Not facts, so much as thoughts. Some ideas may resonate, others may not. A few may awaken an inner knowing you forgot you had. Use what's helpful, let go of the rest. Each of these moments is an invitation to further inquiry, looking deeper, zooming out or in, opening possibilities for a new way of being. And I think right in the beginning, it was a very disarming tone. The idea of, I'm not here to tell you what's right for you. And like anything, as you read some of these ideas, take the ones that resonate. Take the ones that really strike that internal chord and use them. Stay with them. And the other things you read, if they don't apply to you, let them go. I think all too often when we pick something up, we have to think it's either 100% or nothing. And as you read this, certain passages and certain parts really sound true to me. And I can hear myself in them. And I'll confess, as I'm now starting on a new career, my coaching career that I'm starting to take off with, and I'm writing. And I'm really trying to find that book that I have in me and how I can take what I've been able to learn over these, 50 some years on this planet and offer it to other people. So he then comes on, those who do not engage in the traditional arts might be wary of calling themselves artists. They might perceive creativity as something extraordinary or beyond their capabilities, a calling for the special few who were born with these gifts. Fortunately, this is not the case. Creativity is not a rare ability. It's not difficult to access. Creativity is a fundamental aspect of being human. A calling for it's our birthright, and it's for all of us. Creativity doesn't exclusively relate to making art. We all engage in this act on a daily basis. And that's where we open up in here. That's the first thought we get. So as he takes us through, he then brings us to looking inward. He talks about creativity in general, and then Rick Rubin really hands it to us to go internally. The sound of water churning in the distance is audible. I feel a breeze of what might be warm air, though it's difficult to tell since my arm hair senses the movement is cooling. 2 birds are singing, and with my eyes closed, I'm placing them approximately 50 paces behind me and to my right. Now a smaller bird, or at least one with a smaller and higher pitched chirp, enters the soundcast behind me to the left. From the rhythmic interplay, it seems clear the birds are not in conversation. Each sings its own song. I notice the sound of a passing vehicle and in the distance children's voices. A blur of rhythmic music arrives from the far left. There is an itch on the left side of my face, just in front of my ear. A vehicle with a larger, heavier sound passes, and a bit of jazz music makes an appearance much closer to my position. Only now do I realize I turned it on earlier at a quiet volume, and it had been audible until this moment. Someone arrives, I open my eyes, and it all goes away. It's common to believe that life is a series of external experiences and that we must live an outwardly extraordinary life in order to have something to share. The experience of our inner world is often completely overlooked. If we focus on what's going on inside ourselves, sensations, emotions, the patterns of thoughts, a wealth of material can be found. Our inner world is every bit as interesting, beautiful, and surprising as nature itself. It is, after all, born of nature. When we go inside, we are processing what's going on outside. We are no longer separate. We're connected. We are one. Ultimately, it doesn't make a difference whether your content originates on the inside or the outside. If a beautiful thought or a phrase comes to mind, or if you can see a beautiful sunset, one's not better than the other. Both are equally beautiful in different ways. It's helpful to consider there are always more options available to us than we might realize. That chapter really spoke to me because it's the idea of the inspiration that's all around us, that we don't have to live a life like Indiana Jones, and we don't have to go tramping all over the world. It's the ability that he points out here to see the world in a grain of sand. But then the flip side is, can we see the grain of sand in the world? That we are completely connected. And I like the idea of just going and sitting in nature. It's so interesting how often when you have a mental block with whatever you're doing, trying to plan something, trying to create something, that if you step away from it and you go out and you take a walk, or you go for a bike ride, or you get on your surfboard and you go out and surf, how many times everything just becomes much more clear. And that's kind of the idea that's in here. That passage reminded me of a good friend of mine who just published a book. And he talked about how the chapters were written on his walks on the beach, that he would run through the dialogue in his head. And when he's not sitting necessarily in front of a pad of paper or a keyboard, that's when the ideas could flow most freely. And I think as I read that passage from here, that's the nature of creativity. We have to find what sparks our creativity and what it is we do that brings it back along. So I enjoyed that because I thought it was something that could speak to all of us. As we get a little bit deeper, he does give a little bit more direction. There's a point in here that is thoughts and habits not conducive to the work. Believing you're not good enough. I think we suffer through that one quite often. Feeling that you don't have the energy it takes. Mistaking adopted rules for absolute truths. You don't have to do things the way they've always been done. Some of the best things break the rules and figure out a new way to create. Not wanting to do the work. Laziness. I can't speak for everybody, but I know that I've had those days that I just don't want to get started. And when I do get started, I struggle through it. But eventually, as I break through, they can be some of my best days. Having goals so ambitious that you can't begin. Maybe for me, rather than saying, I want to write and publish a book, I just want to get down the first 5 pages. I want to see what I have to say and where those pages go. Because writing a page is doable. Writing a whole book can seem really disarming. Abandoning a project as soon as it gets difficult. If it's your passion, the creative act, things are going to be challenging. People might even think it's a dumb idea. But the idea is to kind of push through. And in the end, maybe it won't work. Maybe you create 10 things and 8 of them don't work, but 2 of them do. Letting a perceived need for funding, equipment, or support get in the way. We all tend to make excuses on our creativity. I can't do it because I don't have this. I don't have that. I need more money. Well, if it's something you believe in doing, you've really got to be able to do it. Romanticizing negative behaviors or addictions. That's a really rough one, but it's one that definitely happens. We especially for me as a student of literature for so many years, we look at the great writers. You know, we romanticize the alcoholism of some of these writers when, you know, really, who knows? Maybe they could have produced far better work without it. You know, but it's not a way that we have to be in order to create that kind of work. I remember hearing a story about John Coltrane and how all of the young musicians wanted to mimic John Coltrane's drug use because they thought that's where the creativity came from. And he'd be the first person to tell you it wasn't that at all, to stay away from that. A few more: impatience. It may not come overnight. It might take some work. And thinking anything that's out of your control is in your way. Sometimes we just have to look at the things that are out of control and realize, hey, I need to work without that. I need to go beyond that. I need to find my own voice in what's going to make it work. So I like that one. And he follows it up with getting now into the work you're doing. Create an environment where you're free to express what you're afraid to express. And that's a really, really good, you know, sometimes we have to go deep into what it is that's motivating us. And many times that's some stuff that we're afraid to say. We're afraid to get it out. We're afraid to clear it through. And when we tap that, when we really get that onto the surface, one, we can deal with it. And two, eventually we can make it work for us. You know, we can make whatever we're afraid of seeing work for us. The last little bit I'll share is he moves from the process of the seed to the process of crafting or growing. And he says, crafting contains a paradox. To create our best work, we are patient and avoid rushing the process, while at the same time, we work quickly without delay. By remaining too long in this phase, many pitfalls may arise. One is disconnection. If an artist is creating a beautiful work and keeps endlessly crafting it beyond the need, sometimes they suddenly want to start all over. This can be because they've changed or the times have changed. Art is a reflection of the artist's inner and outer world during the period of creation. Extending the period complicates the artist's abilities to capture a state of being. The result can be a loss of connection and enthusiasm for the work over time. Another challenge we might call is demoetitis. Demoetitis happens when the artist has clung too long and too tightly to their first draft. The danger of living with this unfinished product for too long is that more often an artist is exposed to a particular draft of a work, the more final that form can become in their mind. A musician might record a demo of a song very quickly. They could listen to it thousands of times and imagining developing it all to it can be. Yet when it comes time to actually make the best version of the song, the demo may be so ingrained in their head that any changes to it seem blasphemous. When we become overly attached to a premature version of the work, we do a disservice to the project's potential. And I loved that part because that idea is we have to allow room for growth. We have to understand that things change over time. We change over time. So what we started doing at one point, we may not be that person anymore, and we may not be able to give it that authentic voice. So that process definitely opens you up to being who you are when you need to be. I have a little bit of the book to go that I'll finish up for Friday, where I'll be on time with giving my recommendation. But being about 3/4 of the way through this book, I cannot recommend it enough. No matter what creative path you want to take. In many ways, I was struck because I've seen pictures of Rick Rubin's house, and he lives in a very minimalist fashion, a very, very simple, non-distracted life. And the book is written in that same manner. You know, the book doesn't go overboard. It has very simple, short chapters that are easy to process and easy to digest. And I love that he starts each chapter, he starts each part with a small passage. It kind of grooms the soil for something to grow. It gives you a little bit of a thought that things may soon come up. The other thing I want to share with you is, as I said, while I'm reading this book, I had the opportunity on my drive to listen to 2 books, and they were both fantastic. So I know the titles. I'm going to get you the authors' names as well. The first book that I listened to, my wife and I listened to on the way down, and I really think it was, Myra's recommendation. And it was a disturbing recommendation, but it was fantastic. It was the book Mexican Gothic. And I'm looking for the author right now, so I'm sorry. Give me a quick minute. Let me search. So it is Mexican Gothic, and the story is written by Silvio Moreno Garcia, and the story takes place in a very remote village of Mexico, an old mining town, and one of the characters who lives in Mexico City is drawn because of something that is amiss down there with her cousin, and she's there to go give her cousin moral support and see if her cousin needs any kind of medical help. But she gets drawn into this very, very corrupted and dark family, and it looks at generational connections. It is a bit on the horror side, and it just, though, paints an absolutely haunting story. There are some disturbing scenes in it that will definitely stay with you, but it is a beautifully and brilliantly written book. The other book that we listened to on the way back, a bit of a shorter read, was Sourdough by Rubin. And Sourdough is a somewhat satirical story. It looks at the food industry, but it looks at our main character in this story is trying to perfect the computer automation on mechanical arms in the process of creating food to take kind of people out of the process and make it an all mechanized thing. But while she's in San Francisco working for this company, she discovers these 2 gentlemen who are creating these beautiful, delicious soup and sourdough, and they end up having to leave, but they leave her the sourdough recipe and a sourdough starter, and then begins this wild journey of her starting to bake these sourdoughs, or more likely the starter creating its own sourdoughs, and how we try to monetize all of these kinds of things, and what is our relationship with food. That was a quick read. It was engaging. It went very quickly. It was humorous at many points, and listening to it on Audible, I think it's only a 6.5, 7 hour listen. So it was great for a shorter car ride when we were going through. So they would be my recommendations for today. And I thank you for joining me again in the Mindful Classroom. And I look forward to bringing you more book selections and more ideas. Peace, my friends.